Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Thank you for coming. My name is Protector Busisiwe. I am chairing this briefing today. I want to share a few house rules. Is everybody's cell phone on silent? And the second issue that I want to highlight is that the Public Protector will be releasing various reports as it has been outlined on the media advisory. If there are any other issues that you'd like to ask the Public Protector, which are not about the public, or about this briefing today, we're going to entertain them after the briefing. Thank you. I'm now handing over to the Public Protector.
Thank you, Ms. Masana, and good afternoon. I thought it's still the morning. To everyone in the room, and welcome to Public Protector South Africa. You are our key stakeholders, and we wouldn't be able to disseminate any information to our key clients and stakeholders if it is not your assistance. Therefore, I appreciate it so much that you've made time to come and share this moment with the office. You also hold the public and private sectors as well as civil society accountable by shining the light on wrongdoing that occurs out of the glare of the public in any sphere of society. So I would say keep up the good work which you are performing within the guidelines of your codes, and making sure that you report fairly and to the benefit of the public. Without further ado, let me deal with the business of the day. I have called this media briefing to release to the people of South Africa the outcomes of some of the investigations that my team and I have worked on. Again, while still on that, I would appreciate the effort and the hard work which the staff of the Public Protector have done and have dedicated all their time to make sure that we are serving South Africans. You already know that the public release of my investigation report is a duty imposed by Section 182(5) of the Constitution, which provides that the Public Protector must be open to the public. The reports must be open to the public unless exceptional circumstances to be determined in the national legislation require a report to be kept confidential. And as well, the provisions of the Public Protector Act, Section 8(1), requires me to publish reports. I normally publish the reports in the website, but I think that is not sufficient because not everyone has access to the internet, and some of the people are also not literate, and again, the grassroots who don't have access to the resources will depend on you as the media to disseminate the information. The report I'm releasing today is part of the 34 that I have issued since I took office a little over 13 months ago. And a lot of these reports can be found on our website, as I've indicated. And in the press kits, you will find full versions of at least 14 of the most recent reports which I've produced. Allow me to share with the public in a nutshell what these 14 reports were all about. The first one related to an investigation I've conducted of impropriety by Minister of Social Development, Minister Bathabile Dlamini. Also tied to this was allegations of misappropriation of public funds by the Northern Cape Department of Social Development. The investigation related to the events held at Stridenberg in 2011 already, which were the launch of the 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign and the commemoration of the World AIDS Day. I found no indication that there was any misappropriation of funds because there was enough evidence which was provided that the money was spent properly. And again, there were allegations of blurring lines between party and state issues, which we couldn't find. I've also investigated the undue delay by the Northwest Health Department to respond to a complaint about a death at Mahikeng Hospital in that province. The complaint was lodged in January 2015 by Mr. Godfrey Maseng, and he alleged that the department delayed to respond to his complaint about the death of his mother, who passed on at the facility in June 2003. In the end, I found the allegation that the hospital failed to provide the deceased with appropriate and urgent medical attention. It was substantiated, and I also found that the allegation that the department failed to respond to Mr. Maseng's complaint was substantiated. For the remedial action, I directed the head of department to pay Mr. Maseng an ex gratia payment of 50,000 in full and final settlement. The HOD also to liaise with Mr. Maseng for the bank details in order to pay that ex gratia payment. I must indicate that most of these reports we've issued, we've consulted with the relevant departments, and they've commented to our Section 79's notices, and they've agreed to our remedial actions. Another investigation relates to allegations of improper prejudice suffered as a result of maladministration committed by South African Revenue Services in handling the complaint by Ms. Dibeila's Tax Affairs. I must indicate that this one is also one of the best cases we've investigated, where the SARS was very cooperative. In fact, we ended up reaching a settlement agreement with them, and then we've reduced that settlement agreement into a report or a formal report. The next report, I investigated alleged maladministration, tender irregularity, misappropriation, misrepresentation of qualifications, and wasteful expenditure against the former CEO of Gateway Airport Authority Limited in Limpopo. So on the allegations that the former CEO misrepresented his qualifications, that was not substantiated. And then I found the board to have failed to execute its fiduciary duties by appointing the former CEO with meeting the minimum requirements. So the post required a bachelor's degree and a master's in business administration or equivalent. But my investigation uncovered that the CEO did not have a master's of business administration qualification. So for the remedial action, I directed the MEC for Transport to take cognizance of the report and the findings, and as well to deal with the unethical conduct and maladministration by the board. The MEC must also ensure that the board considers the report and, where appropriate, take disciplinary action. I must indicate that the CEO already left the institution. I investigated an allegation of undue delay, maladministration by the Compensation Fund to finalize an objection hearing of Mrs. Robertson, who alleged that she injured her back in 1995 while on duty. The injury, according to Mrs. Robertson, occurred when she was attempting to move a large pot of breakfast cereal on a table at work. So I found that the Compensation Commission failed to set an objection down for hearing. I mean, you could see what are the very menial tasks which are supposed to be done by the various institutions to be able to serve the public. Now Ms. Robinson has been suffering for all these years. The institution is not setting down the matter for hearing for a period of 6 years. So hence, again, my focus is on the grassroots and people who can't afford to take institutions like the Compensation Commission to court to force them to just set the matter down for hearing. So the remedial action, I directed the Compensation Commissioner to ensure within 3 months after receiving substantiating documentary proof from the complainant pertaining to her wasted legal costs, because she tried to even involve attorneys, and traveling expenses, reimburse her the full value of her wasted legal costs, and her traveling expenses. And then the commissioner must apologize to Mrs. Robertson, and that will bring justice to Mrs. Robertson. I investigated allegations of the Hibiscus Coast Municipality, now known as Rain Nkonyeni Municipality, where they irregularly and improperly authorized the establishment of a nudist-friendly beach at Mpenjane Estuary following an application by the South African Naturists Association and KwaZulu-Natal Naturists Association. I found that the municipality improperly designated Mpenjane Estuary as a nudist-friendly beach and without following proper procedures. They also violated their own bylaws in this particular instance. So for the remedial action, I directed the council to reconsider the council resolution within 30 days, taking into account the fact that its adoption was inconsistent with the municipality's bylaws. I investigated the abuse of power and maladministration at Eskom relating to the termination of a contract of services awarded to Castle Terminal for the installation of lighting fixtures at the power utilities fossil-fired power station, and irregular involvement of Arcon and Voltex in the tender. I found that the allegation that Eskom's cancellation of the contract was improper was not supported by the evidence. But then as the other one of the remedial action which I've found in this particular instance is that the chairperson of the board must ensure that the board take cognizance of the finding where they involved some companies in drafting the tender specifications, but then at the end of the day ended up awarding the contract to the very same companies. Therefore, Eskom had to take cognizance of the findings and conduct any action or write an apology letter to the complainant. They've already taken disciplinary action against the said officials who performed this improper conduct. I investigated failure by the Northwest Department of Culture, Arts and Traditional Affairs in Northwest, where there were 178 employees who were whose services were terminated in January 2000. They were recruited by the then Botswana government as tribal officers and trained by the Homeland Police Force. The main complaint here was the cancellation of their termination of the service without following proper procedures. So that was substantiated and that was discussed with the relevant department. They agreed to the proposed remedial action of paying the said employees 12 months salary because it was impossible to be reinstated. Another complaint is the complaint against the HOD of the Department of Labor, in fact of Agricultural Development, to implement the Labor Relations Unit investigation, where an employee was supposed to be absorbed in a certain position, but then she was then allocated to a wrong position. And then that as well was discussed with the relevant department, which agreed to reinstate or even to place that employee in a correct level. So the new report which I'm issuing today, which is not on the website, relates to the allegation of maladministration by the South African Police Service with regards to its handling of an appeal of Mr. John Thomas, who complained to my office in August 2014 that he was employed by SABC as a constable from 1 July 2004 to 1 August 2014, the day on which he was dismissed from service. He proceeded to lodge an appeal against his dismissal in August 2014. I found that the allegation that SABC unduly delayed the finalization of the appeal was substantiated, as SABC failed to finalize Mr. Thomas' appeal within 30 working days after the appeal was received by the appeals authority. For the remedial action, I have directed the National Commissioner of Police to pay Mr. Thomas his full salary and benefits for the period starting September 2014 to January 2016 within 30 days, working days from the date of my report. In this instance, they failed to follow their own policies. If you lodge an appeal and they are not finalizing it within 30 days, you need to be reinstated. Therefore, that was not done. In the next one, I also investigated allegation of undue delay by the SAPS to inform Mr. Mkhwebane of the outcome of his application for re-enlistment in the police service during 2010. In the main, Mr. Mkhwebane alleged that SABC in Limpopo unduly delayed to process his application for a re-enlistment after he applied for the position, which has been advertised in the national papers. The interviews were conducted same year in 2010. He alleged that SABC failed to release the outcome of his application when the results of the application of the other former officers who were interviewed with him were released. I found that the allegation that SABC unduly delayed to inform Mr. Mkhwebane of the outcome of his application to be substantiated, and I also found that the reasons provided by SABC for not re-enlisting Mr. Mkhwebane were fair, just, and reasonable in the circumstances, because even if you were not going to re-enlist the employee, but it would be fair to inform the person on time. So they related to his previous poor conduct in SABC. I further found that the allegation that Mr. Mkhwebane was prejudiced by the conduct of SABC was substantiated. For remedial action, I directed the National Commissioner again of Police to, within 30 days of the date of this report, consider an ex gratia payment, a reasonable portion thereof, to be determined by an independent assessor for the distress caused to Mr. Mkhwebane due to the delay to inform him of the outcome of the application. In this instance, he's been traveling from his place to Limpopo, even to Pretoria, trying to resolve this matter. So those are the issues where a person at the grassroots will have to spend a lot of money just because of the maladministration or that improper conduct of the officials of government. Now, let me take this opportunity to share with you that as an institution or the Public Protector, we deal with such matters, and a lot of our cases are bread and butter complaints, and some of them are the cases which are complex, which normally are referred to as high-profile cases. I must add that these cases do not in any way represent the fruits of our labor thus far, because a lot of our investigation and interventions seldom results in formal reports. A lot of them, it's alternative dispute resolution, way of resolving disputes. For instance, I have been mediating in a standoff between the community of Masiphumelele in the near Fishhook in Cape Town and the city of Cape Town, where the community was up in arms over an array of service delivery concerns, including housing, sanitation, hygiene, and water. So after months of negotiations with the city, I'm happy to announce that we've signed a settlement agreement which, with the cooperation of the mayor of Cape Town, we've finalized this matter, and then as the Public Protector, I'll be acting as the mediator between the community and the community of Masiphumelele. And in the media, there have been a lot of reports about complaints which are lodged by various political parties, and especially political parties, relating to the violation of the Executive Members Ethics Act, which we are on track investigating. I think you asked about the investigation on the allegation of possible violation of the Executive Ethics Code by Minister Fikile Mbalula. We're still on track investigating that particular matter. It's ongoing. And then there's an investigation against Minister Lynn Brown relating to the awarding of 2 contracts of a company named eSmart Solution by Eskom to supply oil to the entity's transformers at 10 power stations. That investigation is still ongoing. The allegation against Minister Masangai, the complaint was he willfully misled the National Assembly when responding to a parliamentary question in a sitting of the National Assembly in September 2017, where he indicated that he met with all members of the board, whereas the DA complained that he didn't mention or he never met with Brasa. That investigation is ongoing. We are finalizing the report. Allegation against the president of violating the executive ethics code relating to an alleged payment of a monthly salary of 1 million Royal Security, a company owned by an alleged close friend of his during the first month of his presidency in 2009. The investigation is ongoing. The investigation against Minister Malusi Gigaba whilst he was at Home Affairs for granting of approval for naturalization to the Gupta family and their failure to table in Parliament the names of the persons granted citizenship. That investigation is ongoing, and the investigation of maladministration, corruption at Mining Qualifications Authority in connection with the administration of public funding of the Sector Education and Training Authority. There is also the investigation against the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Mr. Des Van Rooyen, regarding the issue of visiting the Gupta family. That investigation is also complete, and the report will be issued soon. On the investigation to allegation that the former CEO of Eskom, Mashele Koko, awarded a tender to her stepdaughter. This investigation, you've seen as members of the media that there's a parliamentary inquiry where we will have to be deliberating on this matter and the one of Brian Molefe's 30 million to see whether we can proceed or the investigation at the parliamentary, at the portfolio committee will bear any fruit because we don't have the resources to investigate this. Now I'll proceed to the anchor report for this briefing. Like others before it, this is the report. This report is issued in terms of Section 182(1)(b) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996, and Section 8(1) of the Public Protector Act. It relates to an investigation into allegations of misappropriation of public funds, improper conduct, and maladministration by the Eastern Cape Provincial Government and other organs of state in connection with the expenditure incurred for the funeral of the former President Nelson Mandela that was held in Qunu in the Eastern Cape Province on the 15th of December 2013. I know the investigators also indicated that when you respect a person of Nelson Mandela's statue, his clan name is Adalibunga. So it's written on the cover of the letter to show that we have done our part to also bring justice to this matter on how state resources were spent in the name of his funeral. The Public Protector received several complaints from members of the public in 2014, and as well some were reported in the media. The allegations included the Buffalo City Metropolitan Municipality paid an amount of 6 million to a service provider to transport mourners around East London and King Williamstown to attend the memorial service. The King Sabata Dalindyebo Local Municipality incurred an expenditure in excess of 31 million to procure goods and services for President Mandela's funeral. Another amount of 22 million was paid for procurement of goods and services for the funeral from the 330 million infrastructure grant for the provincial treasury channeled to the Eastern Cape Development Corporation. This money was meant to deal with the infrastructure and social upliftment or development in the Eastern Cape. The funds were meant for the provision of running water, electricity, sanitation, ablution facilities, and replacement of mud schools and refurbishment of hospitals. There were also allegations of correspondence between the provincial treasury head, Ms. Binam Tembu, to the CEO of ECDC, Mr. Master, that was the provincial project host or paymaster for the funeral and all related logistics. Several members of the public filed these complaints. As the public protector, we need to then analyze the information, and on analyzing the information, we need to come up to the issues which we will identify we are investigating, because what I was saying were allegations. Another allegation was that there were reports that an amount of 250,000 were deposited in the personal bank account of the former MEC for Provincial Planning and Treasury in the Eastern Cape, Honorable Maswale. It was also reported that the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency incurred an irregular expenditure in excess of 2 million of public funds. So the issues which we've determined as an office is that whether the Eastern Cape Provincial Government improperly diverted public funds amounting to 300 million placed in the custody of the ECDC, which were appropriated for purposes of accelerating social infrastructure delivery in the province, to use them for the memorial service and the funeral of President Mandela. And if so, whether such conduct was improper and constitute maladministration. The second issue is the issue of whether the procurement processes which were followed by the Eastern Cape Provincial Government in preparation, were they proper, were they fair, equitable, transparent, competitive and cost effective, whether the provincial treasury irregularly deposited this 250,000 of public funds into the personal bank account of Ms. MEC Phumulo Maswale, whether ECDC, in its official capacity as the project host and paymaster, caused the provincial government to incur irregular and fruitless expenditure, and whether the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency incurred that irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure in the procurement of the goods, and the F, whether Buffalo City Municipality improperly procured the services of and paid victory ticket, an amount of 5,985,000 of public funds for transporting mourners to 4 venues for the memorial service, whether King Sabata Dalinjebo incurred an irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure of public funds in procuring the services of various service providers. The next one is whether the OR Tambo District Municipality incurred irregular expenditure in procuring goods and services as well. So a lot of the issues we were investigating relates to the procurement of goods and services, and whether Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality also incurred irregular expenditure, whether the investigation was conducted, in fact the investigation was conducted through interviews with all role players, inspection in local, inspection of documents, analysis of the information. So the observations which I've made from this report, or the interviews we've conducted, there was no properly coordinated plan for all different role players in the funeral and related activities, from the level of national, provincial and local government and public entities. Despite the fact that there were earlier discussions and a plan at national level for the funeral of President Mandela, it did not translate into advanced and coordinated planning in the Eastern Cape Province. There was no operational center where daily meetings were held and feedback was given on the status of the logistics. And accordingly, the related expenditure was not budgeted for, relating in taking of what was regarded as emergency measures, both for funding and the procurement of goods and services. That was mainly the cause of unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. This weakness was explored and capitalized on by some service providers, where even prices were inflated unnecessarily in the procurement of goods. Invoices were paid and there's no proof that the goods were delivered. And the number of people that were transported to the public mourning venues and memorial services could not be verified. Some instances, there appeared to have been improper collusion between officials and service providers at the expense of organs of state involved. Some of the service providers used were not on the list of the registered supplier database of, in fact, the central database, and seemed to have appeared from nowhere. millions of rands of public funds earmarked for service delivery and social infrastructure development were used for a state funeral because of a lack of a coordinated planning, and a similar occurrence of impropriety and maladministration can and should be avoided by all organs of state that will be involved in state funerals in the future by ensuring that proper plans are made in advance, funds are accordingly appropriated, and that the activities of everyone involved is properly monitored. Therefore, on the issues which we've identified, the first one, whether the Eastern Cape Province provincial government improperly diverted public funds amounting to 300 million. The allegation is substantiated because the head of Department of Provincial Planning and Treasury, Ms. Minamtembo, recommended to the Eastern Cape Provincial Exco on the 6th of December 2013 that funds appropriated to the ECDC should be utilized for the funeral of President Mandela. Her advice to the Provincial Exco was based on Treasury Regulation 6.1.3c. However, Treasury Regulation 6.1.3c did not apply, as it was reliant on the application of Section 43 of the Public Finance Management Act that required consideration that a decision by the head of the Department of Environmental Affairs and Tourism in respect of environments of funds between main divisions. So the requirement in this one, she utilized the wrong provisions because firstly, there must be savings in the amount appropriated under the main division within the particular vote. Secondly, that environment must have been intended to defray excess costs or expenditure. In this instance, that was never the case. So the second issue, it was whether the procurement process followed by the ECPG, which is Eastern Cape Provincial Government, in the appointment of service providers, was in accordance with the systems which are fair, equitable, transparent. That one is also substantiated. It means it was not done properly. It was not fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. The next item, where the amount of 250,000 was paid in the personal bank account of the MEC Pumela Maswale, that one was also substantiated because this Ms. Minamtembo, as the accounting officer of the department, approved an irregular payment of public funds into a personal bank account in violation of the PFMA, Treasury Regulations, and Ministerial Handbook. So her conduct was in violation of Section 38 of the PFMA and Regulation 8.1 and resulted in irregular expenditure. Therefore, her conduct was improper and constitutes maladministration. On the issue of ECDC, which was utilized as the paymaster, they caused the Eastern Cape Provincial Government to incur irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. That was also substantiated because there were instances where the head of Treasury, Ms. Minamtembu, and Mr. Sentua, who was the acting CEO and the CFO of ECDC at the time, held the view that the strict provision of the Constitution, the PFMA, the Treasury Regulations pertaining to competitive procurement and expenditure management could be overruled by the Provincial Executive Committee. This misconception resulted in the acceptance of a process where ECDC paid for procurement of goods and services that it had no control over, had not verified delivery of, and had not approved. It relied on the approval of the Provincial Treasury that in some instances were not even involved in the procurement. In other words, the ECDC, it was found that expenditure incurred by ECDC was unauthorized. Moreover, even if the expenditure was authorized, the payments by ECDC would have constituted irregular expenditure, as it was not in accordance with the PFMA and Treasury regulations. The board was not informed about this whole process under the authority of this acting CFO, acting CEO and CFO, Mr. Sentwa, at the request of Ms. Mbina Mthembu. And the funds from which the payments were made had not been transferred to ECDC. It means ECDC was continuing to pay without any invoices or proof of delivery, whereas they didn't have those funds within their allocated budget. When a reconciliation was eventually done, ECDC lost more than 22 million that was originally appropriated to them to accelerate social infrastructure development in the Eastern Cape. Money intended to alleviate the plight of the poorest of the poor was accordingly spent on state funeral. There is no indication in the evidence that Eastern Cape provincial government received value for the 5 million that ECDC paid to Riahola Print and Mail. It accordingly constitutes fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Again, in this instance, the conduct was improper and constitute maladministration. There was also irregular expenditure of 500,000 and fruitless and wasteful expenditure of 970,000 in procuring the goods by Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency. Whether on the issue of the BCM, whether they improperly procured and paid for transport to the amount of 5,985,000, in fact 5,985,000 of public funds to transport mourners. This was also substantiated. The executive mayor and councillors combined Simon Zeda of the BCM Municipal Council acted in violation of the Code of Conduct for Councillors by putting interests of the ANC instead of that of BCM first. They acted dishonestly without good faith and in a manner that compromised the integrity of the municipality. The CFO of BCM, Mr. Pillay, failed to distinguish between financial matters of BCM and the interest of the ANC. He acted in violations of the provisions of the Municipal Supply Chain Management Regulations and the Supply Chain Management Policy of BCM. His conduct constituted financial misconduct as contemplated in the MFMA and the Municipal Supply Chain Regulations, resulting in irregular expenditure for the municipality. So therefore his conduct was improper and constitute maladministration. For KSD municipality, King Sabata Jalil Jebo local municipality, as well, they incurred unauthorized expenditure to the value in excess of 4.2 million. This expenditure would have constituted irregular expenditure even if it was authorized. There was further amount of 1.47812 which was spent fruitlessly and wastefully. In this instance of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, it's where the expenses or even the service, the money is paid, there's no proof of delivery, or even the procured items which are not being utilized. In that report, you'll also see that there's a lot of other things which were procured, like your municipal dustbins, which have been sitting without being utilized, and you don't understand why they were procured in the first place. The OR Tambo District Municipality, it was only one item which was unauthorized expenditure, 443,500 in respect of catering for the funeral. And then you've got Nelson Mandela Bay as well. That municipality, their house was in order because it's only 110,300 in respect of catering for the events. Even if the expenditure was authorized, it would have been irregular, as it was in violation of the directive of the National Treasury, where there was a directive that they couldn't provide for catering unless they can submit approval of council or even EXCO to motivate why they need to do that. So basically, it's mostly the issues relating to compliance to the prescripts. The recommendations which we came up with is that the Minister of Finance, as the head of National Treasury, establishes a task team consisting of all role players at all levels of government to develop a coordinated plan for the eventuality of state funerals provided for in the ministerial handbook. Once the coordinated plan is approved, the Minister of Finance directs that it is issued as an instruction to all organs of state in terms of Section 76 of the PFMA to ensure that unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless and wasteful expenditure in respect of state funerals is avoided in the future. It be compulsory that the coordination of any activities in respect of preparations of state funerals be located strictly in the office of the Premier in the case of provinces, and the executive mayor in the case of local government. And it be compulsory that service providers appointed to assist in the preparations of state funerals are selected strictly from the central database. And as the custodians of public funds, it is compulsory that National Treasury provide funding for state funerals and give guidance on how the funds will be accessed and spent. Because the main cause of this problem was that the Eastern Cape provincial government was instructed to, since the former president or the late president indicated he would want to be buried in Kunu, though the preparation started already in 2011, but then when the incident occurred, then they had to look for money which they didn't have, or the money which they utilized, it's not the money which they were supposed to have utilized, because it still has an impact on the living conditions of the people of Eastern Cape. Remedial action which I'm taking, the Minister of Finance, as head of National Treasury, to request the President to issue a proclamation in terms of Section 2, subsection 1 of the Special Investigating Units and Special Tribunal Act to investigate the unlawful appropriation or expenditure of public money or property, unlawful, irregular, and unapproved acquisitive acts in transaction measures or practices, and intentional or negligent loss of public money by state organs, and state organs referred to in this report, with a view to institute civil action to recover the loss of public money by those organs of state. Provincial Treasury of the Eastern Cape to conduct an investigation into the financial misconduct of Ms. Mbina Mthembu, referred to in this report, in terms of Regulation 4.1.3, and to take appropriate action. The municipal managers of the BCM, KSD Municipality, OR Tambo, and the Nelson Mandela Bay, in consultation and with the assistance of National Treasury, to investigate financial misconduct of all officials of the respective municipalities who are mentioned in this report and take appropriate action. The Municipal Council of BCM to appoint a special committee to investigate the conduct of Councillors Gomba and Simon Zele, referred to in this report in terms of item 14.1 of the Code of Conduct of Councillors, provided for in the Local Government Municipal Systems Act 2000, and to take further action accordingly. This report is intended to assist government, the President, the Premiers, the Ministers, and even in provinces where if a state funeral is conducted, there should be a coordinated and very organized manner of conducting state funerals, and so that public officials are not utilizing state funerals to be an opportunity to just spend state or public funds irregularly and fruitlessly. Thank you.
Thank you, Public Protector. I'm now going to give an opportunity to the members of the media. The session I'm going to